Have you ever watched one of your favorite movies with the volume muted? Do you notice how it kind of lacks a little bit of that punch and excitement that you remembered from seeing it in its original version with sound? Well, audio is important for our video productions. In fact, it's so important that while we will tolerate less than perfect video, think of the shaky cam, Cops TV series from a number of years back. But if the sound is bad, if it's too low or too high, or you can't hear the important parts of it, we'll move on. We won't tolerate bad audio for the most part. So that said, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how we work with audio in Premiere. So here I am in the assembly workspace again, and we've kind of picked up where we left off with setting up our initial core video. We've added some B-roll, we've added a few transitions, that sort of thing you can see here in the timeline. And I'm going to be bringing in my soundtrack that's going to go along with this video. I'm not going to use the one that I have displayed here because it's not the best one for this particular video, but this illustrates a concept that I wanted to share with you first before we start working with audio in the timeline. And that's the concept of clipping, audio clipping. In the old days of analog recording, clipping was common. It was something that, electric guitar players would do all the time to create that nice, warm, fuzzy distortion sound, things like that. So analog clipping we're familiar with. And it whether you like it or not, it's not an ugly sound. Digital clipping, on the other hand, is different. Now, while there are some instances where digital clipping may be applied for special effect, generally speaking, you want to avoid clipping your audio signal. And what does clipping mean? Well, if you look at the audio file that I have open here in the source monitor window, you're seeing the audio waveform, the amplitude of the sound. The higher the peak, the louder the sound. And you can see here to the left, this portion of the sound file is a fairly normal volume. But when you get to this point, you'll notice that the peaks go all the way to the top and to the bottom of the display. In fact, if you were to look at it zoomed in far enough, in fact, if we scroll down a ways here, I believe we can see it. You can see in some of these areas down here that it actually just lops off the tops and bottoms of those waves. So you get a nice little square chopped off head and foot of that waveform. And that's referred to as clipping. So it's kind of like overexposure or extreme underexposure in photography. There's just no data there to work with. And so your computer either has to make something up, it has to interpolate what's missing, or it just sounds bad in general. Well, looking at the waveform, you can kind of see that. But what are we actually aiming for with regard to our maximum volume of sound? Well, we have a VU meter, a volume meter. We've seen it before. It's usually tucked down in the lower right portion of our Premiere workspace to the right of the timeline. And you can see it here. I'll play this in a second. You'll see the volume meter jumping up and down. In fact, let me go back to the beginning of this clip so that we don't max it out to start with. But as I play through this sound file, I want you to watch the VU meter in the lower right corner and see where the highest level gets to on this scale. Now, on this digital VU meter, the maximum volume that you never want to exceed is 0. Okay, that's going above 0 starts to clip. So all of our audio needs to stay below that 0 mark. And in fact, for the most part, we want our maximum levels to be down somewhere around -6 dB, between -6 and -12. We might go above that occasionally for power or emphasis or focus or something like that, but generally speaking, we want our audio levels to be somewhere in that -6 to -12 range on the VU meter here. So let me play this, and I want you to watch the VU meter for a second while this plays. You'll notice that the meter is running right around between -12 and -6. And it's all through this intro portion of the clip. Let me pause that, and I'm going to run forward here to the part where it really gets loud. In fact, let me play through that so you can kind of hear the dynamics of this piece. See, it's going to get real quiet. Bang! And you'll notice now that the VU meter is peaking well above 0. If I pause that, you see it kind of remembers how high it got there. It's peaking well above 0. That's clipping, folks. And if you were to listen to this through headphones, you'd probably hear a little bit of distortion there on the really loud parts. Okay, so can we fix that? Can we fix it? Yes, we can. If you have an audio file like this that is clearly clipped, it's best to do the gain reduction before you bring it into the timeline. It's easier to do it at the source than it is once you bring it into the timeline. Because if you cut it up or you chop it up in the timeline, you use bits and pieces, and then you go back into the timeline to make those adjustments, you're having to go clip by clip by clip by clip. Whereas if you do it at the source before you bring it into the timeline, you can do it once. And then if you cut it up in the timeline to use different pieces, it's already been adjusted at the source. So it makes it a lot easier, more efficient to work with. So how do we lower this volume, if you will, to kind of get it to a more manageable level? It's pretty easy, really. What we're going to do is we're going to right-click on the source clip in our project window. So I'm in my audio bin. This audio file is called One Republic Secrets. You may recognize the tune, actually. But I'm going to right-click on it. And near the bottom of that pop-up menu, I'm going to choose Audio Gain. Audio Gain. We know that we've maxed out at 0 or above 0. We've gotten above 0 in our VU meter. So we know that we need to come down by at least 6 dB, maybe more than that. So in this little dialog box that comes up here, we have an option to adjust gain by X number of dB. I know that I've got to come down at least 6, maybe more than that. I'm going to go ahead and start with 10, minus 10, and see where that gets us. So I'm going to type in adjust gain by minus 10 dB. This is going to do it for the entire clip, the entire source file. So let me try that, see where that puts us. Yes, okay, that brought it way down. Let's play through that now and see what happens on our VU meter. Here we go. Yeah, you'll notice it's writing right about between 6 and 12. Okay, let's go back to the beginning of it and see what we've done, because we've done it to the entire clip. And that's still plenty, even though it's a lower volume there. Now when it goes to that loud part, it doesn't clip when it hits that, that big crescendo right there. So I think we're good at that level. So we reduced the overall gain by about 10 dB. And we've kind of normalized our audio, so we're not getting any yucky sounds at the very peaks. Yucky, that's a technical term, by the way. At the peaks of that really loud sound. Now, if we need to raise the volume a little bit here and there, once we've got it in the timeline, we can do that. We call that keyframing, and I'll show you how to do that here in a moment. So now that we've got the audio normalized, what we want to do is pick out the parts of the sound that we're going to use. Now I'm going to use a different audio track because this one I didn't like for this, except that it showed a great example of a track that's clipped. But I have another sound file, and I believe you have this as well in the downloads, that is called Bassoon Concerto. And this is a little more classical. Let me just play a little bit of it for you. And this lends itself nicely to the Mercedes-Benz classical, classic car video that we're doing here. I'm in the assembly workspace. I could simply drag my audio file right from the project window and drop it into an audio track. I'm going to drop it in A3, audio track 3, and leave a gap between the audio that's part of my AV clips and the soundtrack here. And for that, the reason for that is I may want to drop other audio files in there, like room sound or sound effects or things like that. And I want to give myself a little spacer there between the underlying rug of sound, the soundtrack, and my sound effects and any other special audio that I might want to insert there. So if we play back through this now, you'll see
Buying my first collector car, I was looking at a 280 SL, and Ava said no, we needed to have a back.
Okay, so it's playing along with the audio from the AV clip, from the video clips. But what's the problem? Yeah, the sound is too loud. We can't hear Chuck talking because the accompaniment track, the music, is too loud. So we need to adjust that. But let me suggest something else. Before you just plop that whole audio clip in there, let me suggest that it might be better to find a portion of that music that you want to use. Clearly, this piece of music is much longer than our video. In fact, it's about 2 minutes longer than our entire video. So we're only going to use a little bit of it. But if we play through this in the source monitor, before we drop it into the timeline, we can actually mark in and out points in an audio file, just like we do with an AV clip. So we can pick the part of the song that we want to use. In fact, just looking at the waveform, I think I want something that's a little softer here. So I'm going to kind of scrub ahead, and I can see here, if I zoom in, I can see that right about here, there's kind of a little crescendo, and then you can see the lower waveforms here where it kind of drops off in volume. Let's play through that part and see what that sounds like. And it kind of goes soft here. And then I can see that it kind of continues at that lower volume. Just a little softer music in general for a little ways on from that point. So I think what I want to do is I want to start right about where I have this marker, right about here, just after that big crescendo. And I'm going to mark in. Now remember, I'm not cutting this out of my original audio file. So if I decide that I want to use more of that, to the left or more to the right of the end point, I still have all access to all of that. So let me scrub forward a bit and mark an out point. Let's see. Let's take it to about here and see what we've got. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and drag it by dragging the drag audio only button, drag it from the source monitor down to my audio track 3. Okay, and I'm going to tap the / key to zoom out so I can see my entire timeline, and I see that's just a little bit longer than my video. That's okay. We can work with that. So I've got my portion of the song that I want to use in the timeline. So it's now tied in with my video. But one of the things about audio that's a little different from video is that with video, if you have, as we do here, video stacked above other tracks, you've got multiple tracks of video, one above the other. When you play through your show, when you get to a point where there's video stacked above another track, the higher level track takes priority. It blocks or hides anything below it, assuming that it fills the frame and is fully opaque. It's going to hide whatever is below it in the video tracks, as you see there. Okay, and that's what we use. That's how we used our B-roll, right? Audio is different. Audio plays back everything all at the same time. Okay, so as I play through this, there's no priority, in other words, with audio tracks. So as I play through this with my AV, that's the audio that's from the original video clips, the narration, Chuck talking, and the music that I just dropped in there will all play back together. Let's play it and see.
I was buying my first collector car. I was looking at a 280 SL, and Ava said no.
So you can see it's all playing back together, and that's the problem that we had a moment ago, was that it's too loud. The music is too loud. Even that little softer part of the track that I chose is still a little bit too loud, and it's kind of making it difficult to hear or to concentrate on what Chuck is talking about. So we need to kind of control locally the level of audio so that we can hear the things that we want to hear. Where maybe there are pauses in the talking, we can raise it up. Where Chuck is talking, we can lower it down. And that's something that we do by a process called keyframing. So we're going to take a look at this in the next step.